here's what I know. Someone's going to have to start to fight for Nebraska. All right, so I'm here to fight for Nebraska. And finally, the team grows up. It's what people always ask me about year 3. Finally, the team grows up, and they're like, well, I got to go make the play.
It's time to join the Husker Huddle with Nick Handley and Grant Hansen.
It is the Husker Huddle. It is episode number 9 alongside Grant Hansen. I am Nick Handley. Thanks for being with us today on the bye-week blues portion of this, not just because it's Nebraska coming off of their first loss, but also when there's no Husker football, there's a bluesy feeling, right?
Without a doubt. But we're almost through it, people.
That's right. And we appreciate you being with us. And of course, Grant, if you want to get involved with the podcast, you want to continue to engage with it, there are so many ways you can do that.
Of course. And we'll start off with those of you watching on YouTube, because you can be encouraged. I will encourage you now to subscribe, to like, to do all those sorts of content creator things that content creators ask you to do. Help us out. Give us a comment if you have thoughts on the show. And if you are following us, listening on Apple or Spotify or any other podcast platform, please give us a review. It'll help us out. Preferably a 5-star one, if you can find it in your heart this week to do that. For us,
we try for 5-star performances.
We try.
Sometimes we fall short, just like the Huskers did last Saturday.
We have a 5-star guest this week in Sipple.
We do.
But also, go ahead if you want to get in on the action with us and share your comments on the show. Email us. Email us at our mailbag email, which is HuskerHuddle@myboomerradio.com. HuskerHuddle@myboomerradio.com. We'll flash it on the screen several times throughout the show. So if you miss it here, you'll find it later on.
And for our terrestrial listeners, the old school radio folks, of course, after every game, we have Husker Hindsight for you on Boomer Radio on 1490 and 97.3. So if you, Saturday night or Saturday afternoon is not enough to vent with your friends, you can always vent with your 2 new friends. Hopefully we're all friends here. But as I say that, we don't have one this Sunday because there's no game. So it's every Sunday after a Husker game is when you can check that out. Grant already said it, but this is what we have on the show. Our guest is going to be none other than Stephen M. Sipple. Really needs no introduction, but we'll get Sip's thoughts because we had a chance to see him last week in our Husker Luncheon in Omaha and also in Fremont through Walnut Media. And he had some really interesting, I think, concerns, but also things he was optimistic about, both of which I think you saw play out in some variety on Saturday. So looking forward to now getting his thoughts on what we saw. And Grant, what we saw, I used the word when we talked to Evan Bland on Sunday in Husker Hindsight was complex. And that's kind of where I am with this game. We'll get into that. As we mentioned, there's no player availability this week, so we won't have a player interview, but we will have the mailbag as well. So that's what we have rolling out.
And we have our Omaha Steaks Prime Cuts.
Yes, we do. Omaha Steaks, of course, one of our proud partners here. And Omaha Steaks, your go-to for game day, from sizzling steaks to all of your tailgate favorites. They've got you covered. Omaha Steaks is a proud partner of Nebraska Athletics, and let's not waste any more time.
Well, it's not. This week, it is all rule. Oops, all rule. Like the old oops, all berries this week. Here we go.
I think there's a lot of good things there, but it's not good enough. And that's the important message, is that we have to get better as we move forward. But we faced a really good team early on in the schedule. We've had 2 close games. We won 1 by 3. We lost 1 by 3. And neither one did I feel the panic that I felt for 2 years here from the guys on the sidelines. You can be really angry that we lost the game. That's how I feel, just so we're on the same page. I'm really angry that we lost the game, but I also have to recognize, hey, there's things we're doing well. There's other things we're not fixing. It just can't be just, the D-line stinks, right? It's just, because that takes the pressure off everybody else. I just don't want to minimize who they are, right? I mean, we faced a really good team. It's a good litmus test for us. We can play better than we played, though, and we need to play better than we played. So again, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to underreact and say, well, it's Michigan. Like, we're Nebraska. You know what I'm saying? Like, go play. I believe every Big Ten game is going to be like this. It's like, that's why they created the Big Ten like this. That's why they went out and got these teams, so that every game's going to come down to 3, 4, 5 points, and you're going to have to make one more play than them. Same thing, why would you guys throw the ball out to a tight end? Well, I just believe in our guys. I believe when we execute, it works, and we don't execute, it doesn't work. And it's all within our control, and we got to play a little bit better. And but I'm not going to start second guessing Dana. I think he's a pretty smart guy, and I think he's making good calls. And we just, like I said, Sometimes they work against a good defense, sometimes they don't. They made the play down there. Sometimes I think things are just so lazy. Like, he's completing 75% of his passes. He's played 2 Power 4 teams. Like, even the play with the touchdown to Jacory, like, that's an elite level check. That's not somebody in the headset looking over the sidelines and them going like this. And that's Dylan playing quarterback, man. Like, so yeah, I say it to everyone every time the media comes in. I'm like, let's not do the whole just the Mahomes thing. I mean, I get the Mahomes thing, but that's just such an easy. Let's talk about the football. I want people to see in these guys what I see in them. Right? They play their tails off, and I think Dylan's playing quarterback at a really high level right now, personally.
That's our Prime Cuts, brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Again, from sizzling steaks to all of your tailgate favorites, they've got you covered. Omaha Steaks, a proud partner of Nebraska Athletics. And as you said before we rolled those Prime Cuts, it was going to be all Matt Rule. He's the only person to speak this week with the bye week. Very traditional to not have the players or even other assistant coaches talk. But there was a lot. I mean, he went over 30 minutes. He had his opening statements. I like when he even said, and we didn't play this in the Prime Cuts, but he talked about how he wasn't trying to filibuster his time up there. He had a lot of thoughts. And this is where, between what he just ended there talking about Dylan to where the offensive tackles, how they graded in the game, the growth of the defensive line, some good things, but not good enough things. If there's anything after a disappointing loss, and here we are talking to you on a Thursday, where I think a lot of people have been able to put Saturday's disappointment maybe behind them a little bit, it doesn't dismiss that there are things that this team has question marks. And I thought Matt Rule addressed it in the only way you can right now when you have your first loss after so much positive momentum going into that game. And that's very even keel, very neutral when it comes to not dismissing the things that went wrong in that game, but also not overreacting, because I'm a big believer in this, Grant, and we saw this with previous coaches where that head man is going to set the tone both in the good moments and in the bad moments. And your team is typically going to pick up from that. If all of a sudden Matt Rule is, I don't know what I saw. This was all, we were ready, and then this happened. We had the best week of practice, and then this happened. I don't know what's going on. Then the team starts to take on that sort of panic sense of urgency. Sense of urgency is a good thing, but it can also sometimes hurt you if you have too much of it, and some of it maybe is a little bit misplaced. I think Matt Rule, as he typically is, voice of reason, looked at some things. Maybe there were some things that he didn't know were necessarily that bad when he initially talked to the media after the game that sounds like, ooh, I didn't like that. But there's probably other things that he probably thought he didn't like right after he talked to the media and then said, hey, that wasn't as bad. And that's where I go back to that word complex. I thought so on Sunday. I still think that on Thursday. This was a very complex game as far as trying to assess Nebraska, in my opinion.
100%. There's a lot of things in this game that were worse than maybe they looked, I think, and we'll see that play out throughout the remainder of the season. And I think there are a lot of things in this game that were maybe better than they felt or looked, right? And so the truth is somewhere in the middle, which is why I like where Rule was at in this, in terms of just being a cooler head. Cooler heads prevail. He's rational. And so, look, you can't look at it from an emotional perspective either. And the good thing about the bye week, I think, is that you do get a chance to sort of sit with this game and think about it a little bit more, even though Dylan said after the game on Saturday that it's going to stink to sit with this loss. And Rule, I don't think, loves sitting with it either. I mean, you hear him saying, like, I'm angry about losing this game. So, but you still get times to process it. You get time to you don't have to immediately move on to Michigan State. And so when you have a game like this that you can learn from, you can spend some time with, I think that is, look, obviously you would have liked to win the game, but that's one of the positives that have come out of this whole experience. And look, he's saying over and over, like, hey, it's not all on the offensive line. It's all 11 guys. It's not all on the offensive line that there were 7 sacks. And it's not all on the defensive line that Michigan ran for as much as they did. Now, look, I think both those units deserve a good amount of the blame, but it's not all on those guys. And so I think that's an important message to project publicly, where I mean, that behind closed doors, mano a mano, Rule and his coaching staff are able to point specific guys and specific things out and say, hey, this is why, this is your fault, basically, that this play played out in this way. That's not necessarily something to do in the public, in front of the media. And so, again, he continues to do a good job of messaging and being an open book in front of the press corps.
I was going to say, I think this is another thing you and I talked about on Sunday, is this is very important tape. This isn't a burn the tape type of game.
Right.
This is a game where even with some of those warts, if you will, between Akron and Houston Christian, neither one of those teams could exploit Nebraska, even if they were making mistakes. Michigan did that because Michigan's a good football team. So there's going to be a lot of, I think, positivity when it comes to being able to point out where a certain person or position group didn't do their job, to be able to say, you didn't do it, and now look how that impacted the team negatively.
Right.
So again, these are moments where Nebraska can find that growth, I think, in conference play.
The other big story really of the week during this bye week ties into that last bite from Matt Rule about Dylan Raiola, and sort of, I think this is sort of the first time he's publicly acknowledged the weird national discourse surrounding his quarterback, and he defended him, which I'm glad that he did. And he did it rationally. And it is fascinating, again, for me to watch this play out, especially over the course of the offseason to now, where you had people saying DJ Lagway is clearly a better quarterback. There are 10 to 15 quarterbacks in college football that are better than Dylan Raiola. I think through the first 4 games, that's a really, really hard take to support. And then there are people, not just people saying that before the season, but there are people after this game in which Dylan completed over 75% of his passes, in which Dylan had a QBR of 155. If I'm reading that. Oh, no, sorry, 64.6 QBR, just an ESPN quarterback rating of 155. 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 308 passing yards. And people are saying that Dylan Raiola was the problem, and in which a game Nebraska allowed a ridiculous amount of rushing yards and 30 points to Michigan. So it's ridiculous. And there are people, I'll specifically name Tom Fornelli, who sort of beclowned himself this week. There are others that have sort of got in on the action. It's so fascinating, too, to watch those people backpedal a little bit and then also simultaneously play the victim and make it out like Rule sicked all of Husker Nation on them this week with that comment.
Backing up his guy.
Yeah, which you attacked.
Yeah.
And this specific individual who I've seen backpedaling the most is somebody that took Rule out of context in August in a big way on a podcast that's local here, part of his network, and then had to proceed to apologize directly to those guys and call Rule and apologize during the offseason. So he is already sort of just completely destroyed his credibility. And I do wonder to some extent why Nebraska fans continue to interact with this individual. But my question remains, what in the world does Dylan have to do for people to stop doing this, to stop making the Mahomes comparison as well? Like, how well does he have to play for people to start actually looking at his level of play instead of, oh, he flexed and wears number 15 and he's doing the Mahomes flex like Bleacher Report posted.
Yeah.
And you have people piling on saying, why can't this guy be his own player with thousands and thousands and thousands of likes, as if Mahomes is the only guy who has ever flexed his muscles in a football game ever. It's just so stupid, ridiculous. Matt Rule called it lazy. It's just, it's worse than that. It's dumb. It's just straight up dumb. And
I'll answer that question.
It
you said what needs to happen. I'll answer that. He needs to win. And I'm not saying, hey, he was the reason they did lose. But when you're the quarterback, and Dylan, and the best part about this entire conversation, because you're not wrong, and good on you to be able to see through what, I still think Nebraska fans are feeling emotion. And so everybody always wants somebody to blame. Quarterbacks are always going to share the brunt of that, if not the majority of that, because of the position and the high profile position. But the beautiful thing about all of this is the family that Dylan comes from. When you think about Dominic and his time at Nebraska, and very vocal guy, very tough-minded guy, but then he goes to one of the toughest cities in all of the country in Detroit and plays a very lengthy career for an organization that did not experience a lot of sustained success during Dominic Raiola's time. He knows about the criticism. He knows about a lot of the armchair quarterbacks out there. And so Dylan, I think, is conditioned to understand that with that high profile comes that type of criticism. And much like how Matt Rule approached this week after that loss, being very neutral, very even keel, Dylan Raiola is approaching it the exact same way. And that's what you got to have.
And I don't think it's going to affect him at all.
Right.
he's close to Stafford too, who was obviously in Detroit when things weren't going well, right?
Very good point.
I don't think it's going to affect him. It's more about sort of the way that I think Nebraska fans necessarily feel disrespected, and they want that respect for Dylan.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it does mess with them a little bit behind closed doors, especially the Mahomes stuff.
I'm sure.
Because that's stuff that's probably the most hurtful and the most ridiculous. But anyway, we got to get to Steve Sipple, but we also have to thank our friends at Omaha Steaks who sponsor our Prime Cuts that we just discussed.
That's right. We mentioned great college football lineup this weekend, but we'll be back at it at home next weekend. So tailgates, my gosh, Omaha Steaks has everything.
They got you lined up.
Yeah, you got the tender steaks, and there's just nothing better than cutting into it right off the grill and just tasting that flavor. You and I have both been talking about that.
It's a great thing.
We love it. But they got chicken wings. They've got those pre-smash burgers I was talking about last week that are perfect and flavorful, and of course that signature Omaha Steak seasoning. But also, and I told you, my wife is very picky when it comes to hot dogs. She loves these things. She was telling our neighbors about them. She's like, yeah, if we're going to do a tailgate, we got to have those Omaha Steaks hot dogs too, because they're great. And so there's so many for every person in your tailgate or in your family when it comes to cooking up Omaha Steaks, because it's quality product, no matter whether we're talking about the traditional steaks, the bacon wrapped sirloins or the New York strips, or something as maybe a little non-traditional from Omaha Steaks, like the chicken wings, like the hot dogs, because it's done well.
Well, we have a way to make it a little bit more affordable for you, don't we, Nick?
Yes, we do. And of course, right now, if you use the promo code HUDDLE, you'll get $35 off of your order, because they've got their summer sizzle sale going on right now. 50% off site-wide if you just go to omahasteaks.com. Use the promo code HUDDLE. As we get into the bye week, you got to sometimes get into the conversations that not only took place on the field in that Michigan game, but also what lies ahead for Nebraska. And probably the best person to go over that is Steve Sipple, HuskerOnline, 93.7 The Ticket. You know Sip. We saw a lot of Sip last week making the round, speaking to various audiences about Nebraska football. And Sip, first of all, thanks for coming on. You do these things all the time, whether you're talking to an audience, a luncheon, but everyone's always so captivated on what you have to say. But there were a lot of things you said between talking to an Omaha luncheon and a Fremont luncheon that Grant and I had a chance to see. A lot of things you brought up about that Michigan game, especially the things that concerned you. We saw a lot of that play out on Saturday in this game.
Yeah, not all of it though, because I don't think I raised the pass. I didn't think I said much about Michigan's pass rush. I didn't know that speed to power game would look like that, where those guys on the edge were lining up wide and coming hard and collapsing Nebraska's pocket like that. But yeah, there were some other things that concerned me that came to fruition. But that's the thing I didn't anticipate, was Michigan's pass rush being that strong.
Stip, one of the things you talked about in that those luncheons was the chess match between Dylan Raiola and Wink Martindale, this 20-year-old, 19-year-old kid, and this 60-year-old old vet mad scientist on the defensive side of the ball. In retrospect, who won that chess match?
I mean, you'd have to say Martindale. They had 7 sacks. Now, here's the thing, though, Grant. I don't like to pin that on Dylan Raiola. But I think Michigan, you would say that Wink had a good day. I mean, he really, that 7 sacks is 7 sacks, okay? And then if you look at the Pro Football Focus stats, I think they got 24 pressures and 49 dropbacks. 24 pressures and 49 Dylan Raiola dropbacks. I mean, that's extraordinary. And he's Wink Martindale is a pressure guy. That's his MO. It's his forte. It's pressure. Matt Rule said that last week. So, I mean, you have to say that Martindale had a good day. I don't pin that all on. There's always, the reason, and I don't want to come off. I always do kind of come off as an apologist for Dylan. I get that. But in this case, it's real. What do you do if your tackles aren't holding up? If you're a quarterback, think about it now. If your tackles aren't holding up, which they weren't, it was evident. It was really evident on the first drive. It was going to be a problem. Nebraska went down the field. If you remember, Dylan was having to escape. And then if you're not running the ball well, Okay, now where? Now where are we doing? They ran, Emmett Johnson ran 5 times for 10 yards in the second half. Pockets collapsing, can't run. You're just asking so much of your quarterback at that point.
I'm going to give you a chance and throw up a softball for you to be an apologist for Dylan here.
Please.
Please.
Yes.
But given all of that you just said, and how often we even talk about, just getting after the quarterback to the point where you have guys around his feet and that throws everything off for a guy. Dylan was dealing with all of that and more. He was taking big hits left and right throughout the course of this game. How much more impressive is it that he was able to handle all of that and still complete 30 of 41 passes, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, and over 300 yards passing?
That's the kind of game where he makes himself very appealing in the eyes of NFL people, which he did. He did. I know Nebraska fans don't want to hear it, but if you talk to not any, but there's guys that will tell you, Dan Orlovsky, for instance, that, when they see that, when they see how he dealt with all of that pressure and not only dealt with it in terms of putting up decent statistics, but also dealt with it in an intangible sense. You didn't seem yelling, sniping at guys, You didn't see him hanging his head. You didn't see palms up. You didn't see bad body language. So he dealt with all of that. Now, you don't want to see it going forward. You don't want to put him under that kind of pressure, that kind of stress every week. And guys, Nick and Grant, that's what you got to look for going forward. Do they solve these issues? And Matt's right, Matt Rule, that they're not always going to see teams as strong in the front seven as Michigan. But is that the answer? You just hope that you don't play somebody that's strong in the front seven.
You just hope you don't see a running quarterback again. It's a similar conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah, you hope you don't see it. That's not the way you want to live in this world, right? Just hoping you don't see certain things. Mm-hmm. You want to be equipped to face whatever. And maybe Nebraska, you can't. Maybe that's too much to ask of Nebraska right now, but it can't be that way much longer.
I want to key on something you brought up last week about the defensive line and just their overall size compared to the defensive line in the previous couple of years. And in some big moments in this game, especially on Underwood's quarterback draw, where, it just opened up. And I remember Matt Rule saying after the game that defensive line's got to make a play there. They've got to close down that gap. That was when I'm talking about certain concerns that you had going into this game. It was that size of the defensive line and just the overall. We could make this just about the line of scrimmage period in this game.
Yeah, we could.
Is that where our biggest question mark is now heading into the rest of Big Ten play? If you're looking at Nebraska,
the lines on both sides, particularly the defensive line. I think that, and I guess you'd have to say the offensive line too. More the defensive line. Size was a big issue. I saw some photos, for instance, where those Michigan offensive linemen were so much bigger than Nebraska's. Some of Nebraska's guys, a lot of them. Nebraska's not undersized across the board up front, but if you see Cam Lenhard walking in the store, or Keona Davis walking in the store, or Petchak, if you just see them out in civilian clothes, they're great-looking athletes, but they're not very big. I tell everybody this. I've said it at multiple shows, but I saw those guys. You see them in the summer a lot because you're at these camps, and they're not in their football uniforms. They're in their civilian clothes because sometimes they're helping, and sometimes they're just around the building. But I kept telling Sean during the summer, June mainly, God dang, those guys are very athletic looking, but they are not big. I've been covering it a long time. I'm not an idiot. You can size up players. That's half the reason I go to those June camps. They're high school camps. They're recruiting oriented. But I go not only for that, but because all of the current players are around. So you get to eyeball them. Sometimes you get to talk to them a little bit. And it was very striking to me how small Nebraska's defensive linemen were. Not all. Again, Lenhart, he's a good player. Small, though. Keona's not very, I don't know what they're listing those guys at. Keona's not very big. Petchak's not very big. I'm trying to think who else. Neri's got size, good size. Elijah Judy, they put a lot of weight on. Van Poppel's okay. I mean, you'd like to see, if you're going to put a guy over the nose, you want to see a 320-pounder out there, 310-pounder out there. Instead, a lot of these guys are in the 270 range. So they just got to overcome that with athleticism. And I think the other thing is, you better not have guys out there that are small and tired. So they're going to have to shuttle guys a lot, I would think.
Sip, if you listen to the radio broadcast on Saturday or Matt Rule's press conference on Monday, I think it's clear, though, it's not just the defensive line that needs to improve when it comes to defending the run. And you just have to look at the play that Buford had on the 70-plus yard touchdown run at the end of the first half for Michigan to see evidence of that. Is it... I don't know if it's necessarily comforting. That's not a great word, but is it alarming to you that it's not just the defensive line that needs to be better when it comes to defending the run? There's issues with fits for your linebackers and your experienced guys in the secondary too.
Hey, Grant, not as worried about that. I think they're okay. I'm not worried about Buford playing. He missed. He wasn't in good position and all that on that particular play, and he didn't grade well. I mean, and partially because of that play, or a lot because of that play. But I'm not that worried about the rest of it. I think you could see some changes in because what am I getting at? Now you're probably like, what's Sipple's getting at? Going off on a tangent. Hartzog, I don't know if you're going to see Hartzog soon. So they're going to have to. I would wonder, for instance, about a Javin Wright, who's an inside linebacker. They might have to move him to like a nickel or something like that. You're going to have to shift some stuff if Malcolm's not available, which I'm not. I want to make clear, I'm not breaking any news here. He didn't play in the game. Let's just put it this way. He'll be questionable against Michigan State. So that's something to watch going forward. But am I really worried about the back seven? No, not really. Not much more worried about the front end.
Sip, I know a lot of people had that similar feeling leaving the stadium on Saturday that they've had in the last decade. In games like this, you and I and Grant talked about this just, in conversation last week. If someone would tell you, why should I feel any different about this team compared to the previous one-score defeats against top 25 teams, did you see anything that made you think, hey, this one didn't look like the previous ones because? Was there something about this game that you're like, hey, you know what? I wouldn't quite go there yet?
Yeah, there is. I mean, Matt mentioned it, Rule mentioned it, and he didn't have to mention it for me to come up with this because we were talking about it during the game. It looked bleak on a couple points during that game. It looked really bleak. I thought the second quarter, Nebraska was in grave danger of falling behind 17-0, and then in the third quarter, it looked like it could get away. Just get away from them. Nebraska benefited from a bad personal foul type penalty where the Michigan player was taunting the sideline. Big benefit, helped Nebraska. But yeah, what looked different to me is what Matt alluded to. They kept coming. But again, I didn't need Matt Rule to say that. We were remarking on it in the press box. Nebraska did keep coming. They didn't go away at all. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that's Dylan. He's very resolute, and he's very much a leader. And Dylan's another reason why I would say it looks different. I think he's clearly a better quarterback now. And that game I think it demonstrated that. Now you got to keep seeing it. We're always in it's a weekly conversation when you cover football. But it looks to me like he's much better. Why is it different? Why does it look different? I would say those are the main reasons. Yeah. They're not. I still like the overall athleticism on defense. The big thing that concerns me is those tackles. I didn't anticipate that Teddy Prohaska and Gunnar Gatula, I didn't anticipate that level of breakdown. So that's what's got me a little, I don't want to say frazzled, but a little confused. I just didn't see that coming.
Sip, where do you go at running back number 2 for Michigan State and the rest of the season?
Makai Nelson, I think. I mean, and I don't say that willy-nilly. I mean, I'd heard throughout August, guys that see practice were like, hey, Makai Nelson's a terror running the ball. I think there's some other things that he's got to kind of lock down. I don't know if it's there's just, he's young. I don't want to go too far into it. He's just young. He's kind of still growing as a person and a player, but I think he'll be okay. And I believe it's got to be him. I don't think Ives is a good reserve running back, and he definitely serves a purpose. Mosey, his situation changed because of Janiron Bonner's injury, and they had to kind of put him back in the slot. I always say this, it's not a 1-for-1 trade situation. It's not Mosey's got to be Bonner now, but Mosey does have to pick up some of Bonner's duties, which kind of takes away from him just being a running back. I hate those discussions, by the way, and I haven't verbalized this, but I've seen players get caught in between, and it usually doesn't go well when they're caught between positions. You know, when we're talking about a guy, well, like remember with Mosey, it was pretty much, okay, start of August, he's a running back. Then all of a sudden, Janiron Bonner goes down, and okay, now Mosey's a slot.
It's like Jaden Doss, except
oh my
maybe
God, that's a great example.
more talented, but it's like Doss.
Yeah, there's a lot of others I mean, you guys know how old I am. I've covered it many years, and when a guy is caught between, it usually isn't good. So I hope they decide with Mosey what to do. Now they might say, "Hey, man, we're just going to do what we have to do. You know, if we need him at running back, we're going to play him there. If we need him in the slot, we're going to play him there." All right. That might be the answer, but I'd just rather have a guy playing a position. So it all goes back to, I think it's got to be Makai Nelson, and I think he might end up being all right. I'm not giving up on the idea that they can't have a pretty good 1-2 punch. It's 4 games in. I'm not giving up on the idea. You know, the clock is ticking, obviously, but let's see what it looks like against Michigan State after a week off.
Ja'Cory Barney, big game, which great to see him be the playmaker that I think Nebraska really wants to see out of the offense. But with his production, you saw a dip in certain guys like a Dane Key. Is that something that it's okay to see that? Or does Dane Key, no matter what the situation is, he was brought in to kind of be that alpha, to be that difference maker? And maybe that was also a little bit of the inefficiency with the offense against Michigan.
That's not, I understand where you're coming from, and I hadn't thought of it that way. I guess I don't think of it that way. The way I think of it is they have their 3. It's clear who their top 3 are. Mm-hmm. And whichever one is going best on a certain Saturday, I'm okay with that picture. Going to that guy, and if the other 2 guys, and I'm talking about Dane Key, Isaiah Hunter, and Ja'Cory Barney, those are, one thing that you know is those are clearly the top 3. I'm not saying there's a monster drop off or anything like that, but you know who the top 3 are. And I think just on any Saturday, you might see Key be that guy that rises above the others, or you might see Hunter, or you might see Barney. In this case, it was Barney. And no, it doesn't really bother me that it wasn't Key.
So I think as we kind of close the book on Michigan and Nebraska, this game is really complex because I think, and I talked about this on our Sunday show, that you can poke holes in Nebraska's offensive performance to the detriment of Nebraska. Oh, you had a 50-yard pass completion and a touchdown that was kind of a fluke play that you maybe shouldn't have had. and you were driving in a 2-minute drill situation, yes, you deserve credit for driving and scoring and getting the touchdown, but Michigan's defending that possession much differently than they would if it was 23-all, 24-all, and Nebraska driving to take the lead and score, right? So you can take, I think, some things away from the numbers that Nebraska produced offensively, and similarly, you can look at the defensive side of the ball and say, well, 60% of Michigan's rushing yards came on 3 plays. Though you can't just totally throw those 3 plays out.
No.
They happened. But it was there were some outliers there too. I just, before we close everything and move on to Michigan State collectively as a media core and for Nebraska's fan base, how do you make sense of all that and just the Michigan game broadly?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you hear a lot is that Nebraska, they lost a 3-point game. I think it's a little misleading. Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, Michigan was in control of that game, most of it. I think you'd agree with that. Yep. Nebraska scored late, under the circumstances that you suggested. So, I think it's a little misleading. But as we established earlier, I saw progress. I did see progress. I got to say, though, that just sizing it up in totality, guys, this is what I wrote, so I'm actually glad I'm saying this. I expected more. Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people read what I wrote and didn't like it. Surprised me, honestly. Now, it was about 50-50, so you probably wrote a decent column if it's sort of split. And I expected more. I expected more from the run game, a little more. I expected more. Listen, a lot of this to me is simple. It boils down to the offensive line. I expected more from that group overall. And that is the thing that I watch the closest going forward, because I just can't emphasize it enough. If you're not protecting the passer well, insufficiently, and your running back run game is, you can't get to 100. Okay, now you tell me how it's going to work. That's a kind of a lethal combination. That's what they got to get figured out fast. They're not always going to play Michigan. I get that. But you can't have that combination when your quarterback doesn't run. You better get something out of your running back run game when your quarterback's not running.
Steve Sipple again with Husker Online and 93.7 The Ticket. Sip, really appreciate you spending time with us on the bye week. Hopefully you're getting a little bit of off time as the team is as well, but always a pleasure to have you on, my man.
Yeah, you don't ever have to worry about me working too hard. So
I didn't want to say that.
You guys are great, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your patience.
Thanks, Sip.
All right, see you later.
Good stuff from Steven Sipple.
Always a pleasure.
Oh, yes. And we had a heavy dose of Sip last week, too, with various stops in Omaha at our Husker luncheon over at Big Fred's and then out at the Eagles Club in Fremont. And he spoke out there, too. And
Husker luncheon with Sean Callahan coming up in October before the Northwestern game. So put that on your calendars, people.
Put it on the calendar. Time for our mailbag. If you want to get involved in the mailbag every week, it's as easy as emailing us, HuskerHuddle@myboomerradio.com. We're posting it on Facebook as well, so you can hit us up in comments. You can instant message us, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook.
Good questions, too, we've got from you guys, whether it's TJ, Tim had a PFF offensive line question a couple of weeks ago after the Akron game that, in retrospect, becomes a little bit more interesting, too. You guys have been on the ball, and we've got 3 to go through with you for this week.
Create some good discussion, too. And as Grant, as you mentioned, too, they become very timely discussions that carry on. So we're going to start with PB from the O. Question is, 2 years ago, the Michigan State game had 2 fumbles, 1 lost, and then
talking about last year.
The 2 years ago when they played them, year 1 under Matt Rule
at East here.
in East Lansing. Yeah, this would have been the East Lansing game because. As I was reading this.
We're on the same page.
Yeah, as I was reading this one, I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. So he mentions had 2 fumbles, 1 loss, 2 interceptions from Harburg, and 7 total sacks. Does that sound familiar? They lost a 3-point game, 20-17, that turned into 4 straight to end the season for Nebraska, keeping them out of a bowl game. How pivotal is a game like this?
It's such a fascinating game.
Yeah, the Big Ten tune-up, or as he says, is this also, how much is this a win now type of game? And
that's a win. It's a win now game.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's crazy.
It's as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, wow, that there's some similarities of what happened against Michigan,
right?
With the amount of sacks.
The biggest difference, though, that Michigan State game, you think back to that game 2 years ago, is it will be for Nebraska when they go to Maryland later this year. That was a bring your own juice type of game that you can overlook it, right? Like Nebraska beat Purdue. You said, look, you had 4 games left in the season. You only had to win 1 to get to a bowl game, and Michigan State was floundering and not in a really good place.
Interim coach, they were on their 3rd string quarterback, who turned out to be okay, Levitt, who ended up going up to Arizona State
and being really good.
But still, they were throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and hoping someone would stick.
That was a game where Nebraska didn't come ready to go.
Yeah.
And it didn't bring the energy it needed to win on the road. Now, you're not going to have to worry about the energy side of things, given that this game is at Memorial Stadium. It's not at 11 a.m., so you're not going to have to worry about those things. But one thing I do think about as we look ahead to this game, and maybe that's where the bye week helps, right? Dylan Raiola mentioned it after the game. It's not going to be a lot of fun to sit with this Michigan loss for a whole extra week and not be ready to move on. And look, it's a lot of teach tape. We've talked about that. Maybe that's where it helps Nebraska, where they don't end up being sleepy going into this Michigan State game, that you're not looking ahead to something else.
Yeah.
So that would be maybe the one area that I would consider having some worry if I was going to have any comparison to that game 2 years ago. Nebraska overlooked Michigan State, and I hope they're not doing that here this year either, because look, of everybody that's left on Nebraska's schedule, can I say, I don't know if I'm more concerned about Michigan State than Minnesota, but certainly more so than UCLA and Maryland and Northwestern. And so, look, I hope they're ready to go, prepared, locked in to face this Jonathan Smith coach team that will be certainly plucky and ready to fire.
It's an interesting word to describe them. It's a team that is also going to, they're looking to make a big jump in year 2 under Jonathan Smith. And they got beat up pretty good against USC. They got a backdoor cover of what was a very large point spread. Michigan State, they do have some elements of this team that could be problematic, and the fact that they're also doing a similar situation as Nebraska, at least finally having that very tough tape. That tough love tape of here's where you messed up and here's how it affected our team. That's exactly what Jonathan Smith, Michigan State's doing, and having an extra week to do it as well, being on the bye week. So there is a lot about Michigan State that I think is a challenge. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a different type of challenge than what Nebraska had against Michigan, but it's a challenge nonetheless. This is, again, where, and I would agree with you. I mean, I don't worry about the juice for this type of game because you are at home, but it also feeds into Michigan State will be pretty fired up too, because they're going on the road in a true road environment as opposed to a very sleepy, because any player, any student athlete, any sport will tell you, if they're going on the road, they want to be on the road in front of that environment where it's loud, it's crazy.
You don't want to be in Piscataway on the lake.
Or you don't want to be at the Bryce,
Piscataway, but
or the Bryce Jordan Center in basketball for Penn State. You know,
sure.
You don't want to be in those types of venues because it is tough, other than just the overall competition itself, to generate a little bit of that extra juice. But for Nebraska, the question about the win now thing, I'll do it as simply as this. This is an interesting stretch of games right now for Nebraska, that if they're going to go above and beyond the 6-win regular season or 7-win total season, you've got to win games like this, because you've got Michigan State coming up. You've got the road game against Maryland, and Maryland.
I mean, the nightmare is that you're not bowl eligible at the end of October.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the nightmare where your conversation shifts from, Nebraska making a late season playoff push, or cracking the top 25 in November and playing meaningful football against ranked opponents USC, Penn State, maybe Iowa, turns to, oh no, you need to win one of those 4 games to get to a bowl game and not be taking a step backwards.
Yeah, and that's I know the coaching staff and players won't do it. I'll do it. We do this all the time. You start looking at certain chunks of the schedule and certain quarters of the schedule. Well, if you look at after this Michigan State game, then you have a road game against Maryland, who I'm not going to get completely carried away by their 4-0 start, but they did go to Madison, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's bad this year. Don't get me wrong.
Wisconsin's horrendous.
But they did go to Madison and beat them too. So Maryland is no slouch.
My perspective on Maryland has shifted towards the positive for Maryland. Like, Maryland's better than I thought they were going into the year.
And I think that's fair. So yeah, you got to win these games, because as you get into November, it gets taxing. You got USC there. You've got Penn State. USC at home, but Penn State on the road. Then Iowa. We know that'll be a 1-score game. So, you got to take care of business right now for sure. Next question. This is from Chris. He says, on paper, no one jumps out. We're going Michigan State again. No one jumps out on paper for Michigan State in their offense. Is there a specific player that John Butler will likely be keen on to not let them get comfortable against Nebraska? I mean, I think Aiden Childs is the obvious answer, but I will say there's a receiver, and because I was watching that USC game. Omari Kelly is a good wideout. He is a good wide receiver, although that plays in, I think, to the strength of Nebraska.
Right, but it's the biggest area where Nebraska hasn't been necessarily tested. Yeah. I mean, we can say that, I think, fairly confidently. And look, you can say maybe Cincinnati's receiving core. I mean, who's the best receiving core Nebraska's faced at this point? There's not been a real burner or a guy that's I know this is a guy who's has had a rough time in the NFL, but like, a Marvin Harrison Jr., like that type of receiver that you're like, oh, this guy is the real deal. And Nebraska hasn't faced that yet. And so this could be the best individual receiver Nebraska's faced, apart from what they've seen in practice.
Yep, I would totally agree. Last question here as we wrap things up on the mailbag part of this. This is from Chris W. Said, after seeing Nebraska play a top 25 team, what should Nebraska emphasize more? Takeaways on defense or taking care of the football on offense? Great question, because this is one that I remember having this conversation.
We've discussed it loosely on the show.
And when we had Jessica Cootie on, because her and I got into this on Sports Nightly once, the question was brought up by a listener of more important to get the defensive takeaways as opposed to the offense taking care of the football.
Yeah.
And I was strongly on the camp of team take care of the football. And a lot of that was because the ghosts of Husker Pass and some of the just ridiculous turnovers and amount of turnovers that Nebraska was on that just horrendous run, that if you could just eliminate a couple of those a game, especially in that 3-win season of 2021 where everybody looking at the best 3-9 team and the turnovers that took place. I mean, hell, remember that Michigan game? Adrian,
right, the fumble, non-fumble, forward progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. All those things. So there's been a concerted effort, even in going back to what PD from the
very good
that Michigan State game. They were bad with the ball.
They have done a very, very good job of taking care of the football.
Yes, they have.
I can think of maybe, other than the 2 plays that did result in turnovers this season, I can think of maybe one other quote-unquote turnover-worthy play that comes to mind for me immediately, which was when Dylan was sacked against Cincinnati, fumbled, and was able to get the ball back.
Yeah, got it back, yeah.
That's the only other play, but 3 plays in 4 games, 2 that actually resulted in turnovers, 1 that almost did, that I can truly think of. So they've done an excellent job there.
Yeah, and I think that there's been a concerted effort.
I believe we've got enough games under the belt at this point that we can say that they will continue to do that.
Yeah, and I remember, after year 1 of Matt Rule, he made that a major emphasis on taking care of the football, and you've seen that side of it get better. But also, and this was going back to Tony White. Tony White wanted to be an attacking defense that was a playmaking defense too, that could create that havoc, but also reap the benefits of being able to get the takeaways. Haven't seen that on such a high clip, and yet you get that perfect example of how big it can be. Like Nebraska, when Elijah Judy gets that punch out and Deshaun Singleton gets that, where Michigan offensively is feeling in a rhythm, and all of a sudden something like that completely has a chance to turn the game on a dime. So I don't want to say I'm no longer in team take care of the football, because I don't think anybody needs to be reminded of how important that is. But for this particular team, I might be wondering over the side of team get the takeaways?
No, to me, the answer is Nebraska's defense needs to create more disruption, more havoc. And granted, what they've seen to this point, like you did it against Houston Christian, doesn't really necessarily count for much.
Yeah,
you did it again. You were decent against Akron, and you played a team in Cincinnati that ran the ball a lot, whether it was the quarterback run or the actual regular run, and then a team in Michigan that was very similar, very run heavy. And so I don't know how many opportunities they had necessarily to pin their ears back and just go rush and get after the quarterback yet. When you're facing a team that runs as much as those teams did and had as much success running the football as they did, I think it maybe is a little bit harder sometimes to do that. But to me, havoc, disruption, how much of it can you create? How much more can you get out of this defensive unit down the stretch to create those turnovers, to speed up the opposing quarterback? That's something that I think is a big key for this defense throughout the remainder of the season. We'll see if Nebraska can do anything there.
Good questions. Keep them coming. Again, if you want to hit us up on the mailbag every week, you just email us, HuskerHuddle@myboomerradio.com, or whether it's on Twitter or on Facebook, the Huskers on Boomer Facebook page, or on Twitter, you can hit us on the comments. We'll put up a link every week, so it make it very, very easy to remind you, and we'd like to get those in, preferably by Wednesday morning.
Wednesday's the time.
We want to ruminate on these things a little bit.
Yeah. Let's think about these. We got a chance to do that this week. Are we going to just roll? We can just roll right into picks. We don't have, unfortunately, no player interview this week, no player access for us, and so nothing to queue up for you. Those will return, of course, next week. But we can go into our picks. We got 3 of them. I am a game up. Haha. Yes.
I was bad last week. Ooh, was I bad?
7 and...
You're 7 and 6.
7 and 6. 7 and 6 for me.
We'll flip it. We'll see if we disagree on some of these games coming up. Big Noon has got a top 25 matchup, albeit a team that really slid down, barely hanging in the top 25.
Surprised they're hanging out in the top 25, to be honest. I still don't know what they, again, it was kind of the question I thought going in. I thought they would be able to handle Indiana, but Illinois got thumped last week. And credit to Sig, because that guy is a psycho and one of the most
just Google him.
Fascinating college football coaches that I can really think of over the last 20 years. I mean, in such a short amount of time to make the amount of impact that he has made, but he's different than Bo. He is more of a psycho than Bo. And no, I mean, I think he
wins big games.
I think he is. And also think about this too. Like, he's been at Indiana for 2 years. People are throwing his name around for Florida, any of these SEC jobs that could open up. I mean, Oklahoma State maybe even tries to throw some money his way. Would he leave the Big Ten for the Big 12? I don't know. But look, I mean, he will be one of the more sought after guys
he should be in
this cycle. And the question, I think, becomes for Indiana, has he made Indiana into enough of a appealing attraction from a football standpoint in just 2 years' time that he doesn't want to leave?
No, you know what? Kind of compare it to a little bit, because I thought there were so many opportunities for Matt Campbell at Iowa State to leave. But if you get comfortable with a program and you're making enough money and you like what you have not only built, but continue to feel like you're going to be building, and the support behind you as far as all of the athletic department's move on the financial side of it, as far as what they're putting into NIL and rev share and everything that goes with that. If you feel like you've got a good spot, and you brought up a good point there too about the conference, the current conference you're in. I know a lot of people just assume, well, Indiana's a basketball school, and that's where their emphasis is going to be. But if you start to reap the benefits of all that revenue that's coming in on football and the
pre-rev share.
Yeah.
Pre-rev share, the Indiana to Oklahoma State jump, that would have been a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But now you have to wonder, is the only type of job that could get him to leave where he's at right now an SEC job like Florida? If I was him, I don't know if I would leave. I really don't know if I would leave for Florida. We're way off track to Illinois and USC.
But guess what?
Fascinating.
Now you can tell which game we're going to start with, and that is Illinois coming off of a really tough loss to Indiana. I mean, they got smoked. And USC, we were just talking about them with Michigan State. USC looked good against what I think is an okay Michigan State team. I don't think that's a bad team at all. So USC coming in at 4-0, Illinois at 3-1. Teams are coming off of obviously different weekends, but USC is going to Champaign. Now, normally I'd say like big whoop. Brett Bielema's created a little bit of a buzz though with that program. It's a big noon game. And so there's going to be a little of the extra pomp and circumstance there. So I think that this will be a very good crowd to be behind what a lot of people, I mean, you saw in the preseason, there's a reason they were ranked number 9 going to that game last week, that they could be that 4th team out of the Big Ten. If they're to get 4 teams in the college football playoff, that it would be Illinois. Well, I think we learned something else. Maybe Indiana's got something to say about that. But USC is another one of those teams trying to say, what about us? Mm-hmm. And so I look at between the way Maeva's playing right now and the overall skill that USC has on that offensive side, and their defense has gotten better in the last 2 years. I think USC is a better team. Based on what I saw last week, I'm trying not to overreact to what Indiana did to Illinois. That can be a one-off, but I think there are some deficiencies with Illinois that I was always curious why Illinois was getting the preseason ranking that they were getting. I love Luke Altmaier. I've said that many times. There are things about Illinois and even Brett Bielema that I really like in the Big Ten. But if I'm just stacking these rosters up next to each other, I still think USC has much more firepower, and I think they have enough to go on the road, even with the time zone change. Early game for them. Maybe it's a sleepier start for USC, but I think at the end they pull out, pull away from this game. It's a 6.5 point spread in favor of USC. Big number on the over-under. It's going to be points 60.5 is your over-under.
That I would hammer the under on that.
Game. I think it's going to be a fun contest, but I think USC ends
maybe
up
they think
pulling
USC's
away.
defense is just so bad. You know, they gave up as many as they did to Michigan State last week, and they think their offense is good enough that they'll be able to outscore Illinois. Maybe that's part of it.
Michigan State got a little bit of a garbage,
at that.
But I think USC wins. I think they pull away at the end, and I think they cover.
Okay, this game, Illinois moneyline is staring at me like the Green Goblin mask in Spider-Man 1. I mean, this is just sitting right there. And I picked Illinois last week, and confidently so, to beat Indiana on the road, and I could not have been more wrong. I'm going to ride with the Illini again this week, and here's why. I think this is a must-win for Illinois, and I get it. Every game's a must-win, and Sipple lays out a pretty good case of why that's the case and why saying must-win is kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But if you look at the rest of this schedule for Illinois, you have Purdue, then Ohio State, Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern. You can win plenty of games down the stretch and climb into that top half of the Big Ten standings. But in terms of getting to the college football playoff, there are not a lot of games left on this schedule for Illinois to make a statement of any kind, to even be considered in the conversation. If you can win this game against USC, an opponent that's probably a top 25 foe for the remainder of the season, you could probably drift your way back up to that top 15 range if you're able to take care of business against these unranked foes that you have left on the schedule. Again, Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Purdue. You're probably not going to compete with Ohio State. So you got to get this one. This is probably your best shot at a ranked win this season. You're at home, big noon. Again, you have the pomp and circumstance, and USC is traveling multiple time zones, and I cannot state enough how important I think this is in terms of a factor of determining wins and losses in football games in the Big Ten. This is a lot to overcome for USC. You're playing at, I believe, 10 a.m. Pacific time.
Yep.
So your body clock is just going to be all sorts of messed up.
Actually,
I think.
is it 9 a.m.?
It might be
it's
9.
9 a.m., yeah.
It might be 9.
Yeah.
So this is just, in my mind, this is a lot. I think Illinois comes out pissed off, and at home in front of their fans, they're able to pick up a ranked win over USC. We'll say 23 to, it's maybe a little bit lower scoring, but I think if they win, that's how they got to do it. 23-20,
okay.
Illinois over USC. We'll see if I'm wrong.
I hope you are.
But I have a hard time thinking that they're going to get their butt kicked again.
Yeah, I should throw a score because I did say I thought USC would cover and they'd pull away at the end. So I'm going to say 31-21 is what I have USC winning that one by. Let's go to the SEC. Ole Miss is hosting LSU, the 4th-ranked Bayou Bengals at 13th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels. And I don't want to spend too much time overthinking this. By the way, there's one side of it. I'm a big Quan Lacey fan.
Sure.
Haven't liked his production the last 2 games, but he, of course, we all remember Quan Lacey. Nebraska thought they had him. He's a player, and I think Ole Miss at home and being able to run the football, especially with their quarterback situation, I think is going to be key for them. But I like what LSU's done. But more than anything, I'm a big Garrett Nussmeier fan too, especially what he's done this year. I think LSU has a bit of an edge when it does come to some of the key matchups, in my opinion, and the way that they are distributing the football, both throwing it, but also there is a decent running game that LSU has. Defensively, they've been sound. So I'm going to take the Tigers. It's not an upset because they're the higher ranked team, but this is a team that Vegas, is going on the road. Yeah, because if you look at it right now, drifts. Ole Miss is right now a 1.5 point favorite, so they're getting the home field jump there. Neutral site, LSU would be favored. The over-under, by the way, 54.5 on this one. The money line is minus 120 for Ole Miss. So I'm taking LSU to, I guess, pull the upset. I think it's going to be a great fan. I'm going to say,
look, I think
31-28.
This will be LSU. A fun game. This will be a lot of fun. This would obviously, it feels weird that it's on ABC instead of CBS, but it seems like, this seems like the old CBS games of 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when they had that SEC package. Look, LSU seems to me to be a team that currently is overvalued. It's not to say they can't grow into a top 5 team by the time this thing is all said and done, but 20-10 over Florida is not enough. Clemson has been revealed to be a fraud, effectively. So that takes away a lot of the juice that you had for LSU with this start to the year to go 4-0. Now, on the flip side, there's some reason to be nervous about Ole Miss and not fully confident, right? You didn't look overly in control against Kentucky, 41-35 over Arkansas as well. I mean, that game, either of those games really probably could have gone either way, right? Now, you pounded Tulane last week. Congratulations on doing that. But I don't know. This is the first big game of the year for Ole Miss, to be sure. And I'm going to ride with the Rebels in this one at home. A 1.5 point favorite. I think this is as close. This could be the game of the week. There's so many good games this week. This could be the game of the week. We'll see. But I like Ole Miss in this one. We'll say Ole Miss takes the victory 34-31 over LSU.
Okay, so we got a tight one there. Both of us just disagreeing on who wins. Last game, because there is no Nebraska game, we're going to go with a third one out of the Nebraska realm, but it will stay in the Big Ten, and that is the big one on primetime. Peacock will have the Oregon Ducks going to State College in Happy Valley to take on Penn State. This is going to be a monster of a game. The home team, Nittany Lions, are a 3.5 point favorite. Over-under is 51.5. The money line is in favor of the Nittany Lions at minus 165 plus 140 for Oregon. If you're going off of this by stats, Grant, I think it's
be hard
really
not to pick the Ducks.
Absolutely. But Penn State hasn't really had to lean on Aller too much. This is the game that I think Penn State had circled. This is the one that if they're going to be not only a team that gets back to the college football playoff, but the team that holds the Big Ten flag for 2025, this is that game. This is also an opportunity for James Franklin to silence
win a big one.
The doubters. Yep. Absolutely. And I think there's always that conversation for a lot of coaches, but eventually most of those coaches that are worth their salt are in that elite category that I think James Franklin can be. Remember Dabo Swinney at one point? They're Clemsoning. Well, they finally broke through. It to me, for James Franklin, it's not a matter of if, it's when, and I think it happens Saturday night. I like Penn State hold and serve at home. I think they win this game. I think they cover, but I think it's going to be a wild one. I'm going to say 38-34.
All right, I'm a time zone guy, as I've clearly established with this one, right? If I lay out all this logic for why Illinois is going to beat USC, it's going to be pretty hard for me to walk it back and say Oregon's going to go on the road and overcome Penn State at night. This is a really tough ask for the Ducks. Prime time, once again, you're going an extra times, 3 time zones. So I mean, this is
bi-coastal Big Ten, baby.
This is really tough. And so that's why I'm leaning with Penn State on this one too. You have Penn State coming off a bye week, and we saw the slow start for USC against Purdue to some extent, and certainly I don't think Oregon started as well as they would like when they were at Northwestern. So
it's a good point.
Again, we'll see if I just be totally made a fool of myself by the end of the week. But it's hard for me to look beyond that. I think this will be a close game, obviously. Oregon's laying through, it's 3.5? So Penn State probably wins by that much. How physical can you be if you're Penn State too? How much can you control time of possession and run the football? How physical has Oregon become in its time here in the Big Ten Conference too, right? So I'm on Penn State to win this one. I think they finally are able to clear this bar, win a big game. They haven't had any really great showing so far to begin this year against good competition. So this is kind of question marks about both teams, right? Because Oregon beating the doors off Oklahoma State.
Yep.
Not that shocking.
No.
Same can be said of beating Northwestern 34-13. And so I like Penn State as well. We'll say Penn State gets this one done. Again, lower scoring, I think, 27-24.
This reminds me a lot of the Ohio State-Oregon game from a year ago where we saw both quarterbacks really ball out. Dylan Gabriel got the best of Ohio State at the end there. I think this is going to be the Drew Aller, Dante Moore show. I think both quarterbacks are going to be really solid. Dante Moore's going up against a pretty stingy defense, though, too. So. Yeah. But I have a feeling both quarterbacks are going to have some moments.
This is a game where Penn State needs to win this with its physicality on the defensive side of the ball and in the trenches.
Yep.
On the offensive side, run the ball, control the clock. You don't need to throw for 250 to win this game if you want to win. And Penn State has to throw to win this game. That's a huge red flag.
Which I don't think have a shootout going on. So.
I do not think Penn State could win this game throwing it all over the yard, trying to go one-on-one with Oregon and Oregon skill players.
Conventional wisdom would say, yes.
If Oregon wins this game, it's going to be through flash and everything that makes Oregon Oregon. And if Penn State wins this game, it's physicality and run game. Yeah. And that's what I think ends up winning out here at home for the Nittany Lions.
Well, that's going to do it for our bye-week edition of the Husker Huddle. Big thanks to our partners at Omaha Steaks. Big thanks for you listening, Steve Sipple, for joining the show as well. And again, if you want to stay engaged with it, if you want to be into our mailbag every week, you can email us at HuskerHuddle@myboomerradio.com. Check us out on all of our Facebook and Twitter. We'll update you on everything that we have going on as well, but you can always hit us up there. And Grant, again, for people who want to rate and like the show, we always encourage you to do that as well.
Yes, please go on Spotify, do that if you listen online there, or if you're watching us, maybe you want to help us out, go above and beyond, go to Spotify, go to Apple, give us a review, and then just like, subscribe, do all those normal things that you see on YouTube. And again, get your questions in early and often for next week. Got a lot of time to think about Michigan State, so over the weekend, think about it. Send us some stuff. Monday, Tuesday, we'll talk about it on Wednesday when we record, and you'll see us on Thursday again next week.
That's right. Enjoy a great weekend of college football matchups we talked about. There's some other really good ones, too, that we didn't even get to, but enjoy that. When we come back, we'll be talking about Nebraska and Michigan State. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for watching and listening to the Husker Huddle.